Welcome. My name is Mark Depew. I'm the Director of Oral History with the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library. Today is Friday, July 27, 2018, and I am thrilled today to have Gerald Raschke, Reverend Gerald Raschke, sitting next to me. How are you this morning, Jerry?
I'm very fine now, thank you.
Well, we've got a long conversation, but I've been looking forward to this one for quite a while. You have the distinction of being a gunner on a B-26 aircraft during World War II.
Yes, sir.
And as you just reminded me, there's not too many of them still out there anymore, are there?
No, there are not. I'm going to the B-26 Historical Society next week in Colorado Springs, and I may get an idea how many of us are left, which there are very few of us.
Wanted to start with the preliminaries here. I always get plenty of background, as I had mentioned to you before, so tell me when you were born.
August 28th, 1924.
And where were you born?
Omaha, Nebraska.
Did you grow up there in Omaha?
Yes, I grew up there until I moved to South Bend, Indiana in 1963, I think.
Okay. That's long past the time frame that we wanted to talk about. Tell me a little bit about your parents. Let's start with your father.
My dad was a railroad man for the Missouri Pacific Railroad. He worked for the railroad for 50 years, and that's kind of part of the Union Pacific. And he was what they call a switchman, and they did the switching around the city of Omaha to the various factories, etc. My mother, Louise.
What's your dad's name?
My dad's name was Otto Raschke.
Otto, man, there's a nice German-sounding name.
Yeah, ich bin Deutsch. And my mother was Louise Busch, which is also a good German name. And
spelled the same way as Busch beer?
B-U-S-C-H. And they were all lifelong practically in Omaha, Nebraska. My mother was primarily a housewife because we had 7 kids, or she had 7 kids, and 6 boys and 1 girl.
Now, growing up in the Depression, your dad works for the railroad. It sounds like he stayed in the Omaha area. He wasn't on the trains.
He stayed in the Omaha area, and we were very fortunate because during the Depression area, he had a good job.
Well, that brings me to at least an obvious question for me. That was the era when lots of people, hobos is what I think the term that was used, were riding the rails at the time.
They're riding the rails, and they were also showing up at our back door for a handout of food and things like that, which of course we always gave them.
Does that mean you lived pretty close to the tracks?
Yep, within 2 blocks of the tracks.
Now, I know that at that era, the hobos would know where they could expect to get a good meal.
Yes, exactly, they did. And they kept coming to my house to get food and handouts until we got our dog, which was a Chow German Shepherd mix, who had no use for strangers. I could go further than that, but that's no use for strangers. And they avoided us then.
Was there any way that the hobos would know that they could come to your house and get a meal?
Absolutely, yeah. They had their own system, and it went by word of mouth. They knew which houses would feed them. Yes, absolutely correct.
Did sometimes they join you at the meal table?
No. It was always a handout and a back door.
And what was it that they got?
Whatever my mother had. My mother was a good cook, and so she always had something for them. And we ate a lot of meat, so they probably got some sandwiches and things of that nature. But frankly, I was very young, very, very young when that was occurring, and so I don't know that much about it.
Okay. How would you describe well, one other question about your dad before I ask you to describe his personality. Was he a World War I veteran?
No, he was not, because he had at least 3 or 4 kids by the time World War I came around.
Okay.
And what were you going to ask about?
Well, you were born in 1924, so you're kind of in the middle of the family?
Yes, exactly. I had 3 brothers older than I, and my sister was older than I. That's exactly right.
How would you describe your dad's personality?
Oh, he was a very kind individual, but he was a disciplinarian. When us kids, well, if my mom complained about what us kids did, my dad would take care of it with a ruler when he got home. And they talk against spanking today, but I think it did a lot of good. We didn't get spanked very often, I'll clue you.
And how many children in the family?
7. There were, 7. 6 boys and 1 girl.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an unruly group if there wasn't a little bit of discipline.
Yeah, that's true. However, it's interesting to note that, well, I can give you this as an example. My mom and dad traveled a lot, and they were out on somewhere or other, and we had a babysitter, a man and woman, and we liked them. Oh, we sure liked those people. And when Mom and Dad come home, I said, "Boy, I wish he was my brother." And she said, "What you talking about? He is your brother." I didn't even know he was my brother. And my sister I knew about because she was home, and my second oldest brother was in university, but he studied at home. And then this next one down, he was a roamer, and he didn't ride the boxcars because my dad got him a little letter to the people, and they ended up in California.
Tell me a little bit more about your mother and then her personality.
A very sweet. She was again a disciplinarian, which is very good. She did it in a very sweet way, and a good housewife, a good mother, and I can't say anything at all against her. This might interest you. Us boys, when we would go out and play, if my mother wanted us, she would whistle. Now, I would try to mimic that whistle today, but I can't whistle no more. But anyway, it was a very unique whistle. And when we heard it, we ran home. I mean, really ran home. And people tried to duplicate it. They couldn't do it. She was the only one that could whistle it. And I did in later years. And can I tell you an interesting...
That's why we're here.
My brother and I were out playing, and we heard her whistle. We ran home. I didn't call you. Yes, you did. I heard the whistle. I didn't call you. So, okay. But so then we were playing again, and we heard the whistle, but it came from a house just right near us. So we went up to the house. Here it was a parrot. And it was a parrot that had mimicked my mother's whistle. And as to that parrot, every time us boys would come home from the service, and we were in the service, the old people would loan the parrot to my mother, and she would have the parrot in the house. And then when these old people died, they willed the parrot to my mother. And so that parrot, my mother says that when the parrot dies, she's going to die. And they both died at 90 years old.
Hmm. I'm curious. When your mom whistled, you guys raced back home.
Oh,
is that
boy.
because otherwise you would face some discipline, or because it was mealtime and you're
yeah.
hungry?
Where were you? What took you so long? Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Were you raised in a meat and potato family?
Absolutely. We're German.
Okay. Nice hearty meals, I'm sure.
Yeah. But however, they had to be healthy meals because in the Depression there was a lot of, and during the war there was a lot of rationing. So.
Tell me a little bit more. Do you have any other memories about growing up during the Depression? What life was like then?
Well, I started selling magazines, the Liberty magazine, the Saturday Evening Post, Collier's, when I was 7 years old. And the money helped me get my spending money. And then when I my brothers had all worked for a particular pharmacist. And that pharmacist moved closer to our house. And so at 14, I started working for him, and I worked for him until I went into the service. Oh, well, about a year or so before I went into the service. So we worked hard. And my young brother, that was just younger than I was, had a heart problem. So the money I earned took care of both of us.
Well, let's see. Take a look at a picture of you when you're 3 years old, perhaps.
Yeah.
Young Jerry Raschke, 3 years old. So that would have been what, 1927?
About 1927.
A couple years before the Depression. Right. And then another slide here of the family. Not the best picture, but you can see the family there. And you're up in front, aren't you? In
front? No, yeah, in front, yes. Kneeling down or something like that. Anywhere where the lower part of it. It looks like I'm on those kneeling. It looks like, I can't read it from here, so you can do a better job than I do.
And I would suspect you look like you're about 6 or 7 at that time. I'm
Probably.
not good at guessing that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Well, let's jump ahead a few years and get you into the mid or late 1930s. And what I'm curious about here, you're, already had a couple jobs. You're delivering magazines and all. Were you paying attention to what was going on in Europe at the time?
Oh, very much so, very much so. But see, not until it really got nasty, because I was still very young. But yes, we knew what was going on. My dad was very knowledgeable in that respect, and so we discussed it a lot. And of course, my oldest brother went in quickly. And
I'm guessing 1940 when they started the draft.
Oh, I don't know exactly when he went in, but he was when he was out, he was a colonel in the field artillery. He was with Patton during the war.
Okay.
And the next oldest brother didn't go in until just a little before I did, frankly.
Okay. Well, getting back to the late 30s, of course, by 38, the Germans had occupied Austria.
Sudetenland.
The Sudetenland was at the same time frame. 39, of course, was the beginning of the war. You've got this, sounds like a pretty strong German background in the family. What did they think about
that's a good question. I thought about that often. And I guess that problem was primarily bad during World War I. And my dad never discussed it. So I don't know what they were like, but I know there were very big problems with the Germans during World War I. During World War II, there was no problem. Because actually, when so many of there was 4 of us in the service. So eventually, and no, in World War II, I don't believe there was. I didn't hear anything.
As far as you were concerned, the family were Americans. There was never a hyphenated name there.
No, never, never. Now, my mother and dad spoke German. And my dad's mother, and he spoke German all the time. A funny thing here, when my dad and his mother were talking, my dad didn't want my mother to know what he was saying. He'd speak in a different German dialect, and my mother didn't know what was going on.
Did you pick up any German growing up?
Well, I went to a German school for a number of years on Saturday, but yes, I did. But I've forgotten a lot of it.
Okay. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor.
I can remember it.
Tell me about that day.
I was working at the drugstore, and when we got out of bed on Sunday morning, there was nothing. It was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon when I came home from the drugstore to get lunch. It was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and that was when, in Omaha, we got the announcements of Pearl Harbor. And my first thought was, where the devil is Pearl Harbor? We had no idea. And then, of course, there's a lot of news. But see, there was no TV. Everything. The news was very slow in evolving.
Did you have an understanding when you heard that news that this might have a big impact on your life?
No. No, because we thought the war was going to be over quickly. So, no. At that particular time, and I was pretty young then. Let's see, 1941.
I think you would have been in high school, though.
Yeah, I was in high school. But in those days, people thought that the war would be over shortly, and that wasn't true.
Were you confident that the United States was going to win?
Oh, absolutely. Nobody was going to beat us.
Even when a couple of days after Pearl Harbor, when Hitler declared war in the United States as well. So now you got both Germany and Japan.
Yeah. No. For some, we knew we were going to win.
Okay. Well, I want to talk a little bit more about high school, those years. Where did you attend high school?
North High School, Omaha, Nebraska. Now, don't ask me about my grades, because they were lousy. I was a lousy student.
I wasn't going to ask you that. You volunteered that information. Did you have some favorite subjects, though?
Well, history would be the favorite subject if I had any, but like I say, I was a poor student.
Does that mean you just didn't have the motivation to study hard?
I guess that must be it.
Okay.
I guess that must be it, and I should have had the motivation, but I know one of the reasons was that I was working all the time, even during school. I'd get home, I'd take a streetcar home or right to work right after school, and when I worked at the drugstore nearest our house, I worked until 1 o'clock in the morning. So it was long hours, and I'm offering that as an excuse, but it's not a very good one.
Jerry, that was also a time when there was an awful lot of kids who dropped out of school.
That may be so, but I was unaware of it.
And I suspect your parents never offered that as an option for you or the rest of your siblings.
Oh, heavens no. Heavens no. Heavens no.
Were you involved in any extracurricular activities, or did the work take those opportunities away?
The work took those opportunities away. I tried out track, but it took so much time that our whole family was fast, and so I tried out track, but I couldn't do it with my work.
Your whole family was fast. That's a great opportunity to ask you about your brother Dick, I think.
Dick was...
we can see a picture of Dick here in his football garb. It looks different from the uniforms they wear today.
He was undefeated wrestler for 4 years. He only weighed 125 pounds at the most. He was a track star, and I'm trying to think, and I should have checked this out, it's in my journal, but football players recently that were from Omaha finally shattered his touchdown record, and I can't think of the name, and that's senility coming in, but he was and he could run so darn fast that they couldn't catch him, and he was good. He was good.
And I assume the whole family was proud of Brother Dick.
Yes, it was. But see, myself and my 2 younger brothers were too young to really know it. We didn't realize it until years later when I started working or stuff like that. He was so good.
How much older was Dick?
Well, he must have been about 8. No, he must have been about 10 years older than I was.
Was he the first one to go into the military?
No,
then?
my older brother Rupert was the first one to go into the service. He was in the reserves, and he was called up very early during the war, and he spent a lot of time in field artillery training, and he was one time the manager of Barkalow Brothers, which is a kind of a fast food, what we call fast food restaurants now, and but they drafted him, and we called him in as the reserves, and so I'll say this because it's getting a little bit ahead of it. He went through the war and stayed in. And they called him back. He had 2 restaurants after he got out, after World War War, he got out. And he had 2 restaurants in California. And Korea came along. They gave him 2 weeks to sell the restaurants and report for duty. And so he wanted to stay in after Korea. And he was the head of the West Virginia Military District as a colonel, I believe. And he, along with me and thousands of others, were RIFT, reduction in force, and thousands of us gone. It didn't matter too much to him because he had plenty of years in to retire. But I was just up for my majority, and I got kicked out of that. And of course, I didn't have enough years in for retirement.
And obviously, this is well past the World War II era now.
Oh yeah, that's past Korea.
Yeah. Okay. While you're in high school, you've got at least one brother, and I think you said another brother went in shortly before you did. Were you paying attention to what was going on in the war while you're in high school?
Oh yes, because we studied the history in high school, and I was very interested in history. I always read about it when I was home, so it was very much in my mind.
Were you one of those kids that looked at the maps to see how things were moving on the map?
Yes, yeah, because we didn't have TV in those days, remember, and so all we had was the newspapers. And yes, the maps and the newspapers are what we watched carefully.
Well, I know if you went to the movies of the era that they usually had some kind of newsreel at the beginning.
Yeah, but we couldn't afford the newsreel that often, the movies that often.
Okay. You had mentioned to me that, I guess this is while you're still in high school, you learned to fly?
Yes, I learned to fly an airplane, a Piper Cub, and a Taylor Craft before I knew how to drive an automobile. And it was during the war, and it was against the law for this young Disborough was his name to teach me. So I'd have to buy him some food. I couldn't give him money. And of course, I didn't have any checks, but I couldn't give him money because then it would have to be told. So I'd buy food, I'd buy this and buy that for him for my flying lessons.
Why did you want to get flying lessons?
I don't know. I always wanted to fly. Always, from a very young age. Well, a lot of us young people did. As we'd watch the airplanes go over, the World War I airplanes flying over, and they had the flying shows and stuff like that. So the young people, and flying was new, so we wanted to fly. A lot of us boys wanted to fly.
Well, my next question then, I think I know the answer to. Right before you graduated from high school, then, what was your goal in life? What did you want to do?
Well, I graduated from high school on June 4th.
Of 1943?
Yes. And I was in uniform on June 11th.
Does that mean to say you knew you were heading to the military?
Absolutely. I mean, I was drafted. I had tried to join the Air Force prior to this, before I was drafted. And I took the tests for going in. I passed all the tests, and they gave me the colorblind tests. And I knew I was colorblind. And and I'll tell you, they had, I'll go into this later, but the Ishihara test, the Japanese test, the one with the little colored dots, is foolproof. And they said, well, you can't fly. You're red, green, brown colorblind. I said, I know that. And, well, you can't fly. So I said, okay, goodbye. So I continued to doing whatever I was doing at the time. I think I was still in high school. And then when I was drafted, I asked for Armored Division, Field Artillery first, because that's where my brother was, Armored Division 2nd, Infantry 3rd. I had 3 picks. So they put me in the Air Corps. And I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know there was anything else but being pilots in the Air Corps. And so that's where it started. So I'm going to wait.
In other words, you figured if you couldn't fly, you'd go to the Army in some other role.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Okay. Well, you could have been a mechanic or something like that. Even.
No, never a mechanic. I was the world's lousiest mechanic. No mechanic. And
okay. So you didn't really pick the Army Air Force; it picked you.
Exactly.
Was it already the Army Air Force at the time?
No, it was Army Air Corps.
Okay. When did that change?
Air Force, I think, changed a couple years later.
But during World War II?
Yes, during World War II.
Okay.
We became the Air Force.
Okay.
I don't remember the year, I think,
Yeah,
but I remember it happening.
It's a matter of confusion for a lot of people because
Yeah.
it was still part of the Army at that time.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. What did your parents think about you being in the Air Force?
Oh, they didn't mind at all. They were proud of the fact that all of us were in the service because we were defending America, and they were very proud of it. In fact, I don't know whether you were aware of it, but anytime an individual went into the service, they got a flag with a star on it. And my mother was very proud of 4 stars. And then there was a 5th star later on, but that was kind of after the war.
So, hang that in the front window so everybody can see?
Oh, you bet your life. You bet your life.
Were there any of those stars that eventually turned gold?
Nope. All of us survived. All of us survived. And guy up there was looking out for us.
Absolutely. Well, we hadn't asked about that, but did you grow up in a religious family?
Yes, in a way. Yes, we were quite religious. We didn't go to church as often as we should have, but we were Lutherans, being German, of course. And like I said, I went to German school at the church. But we didn't go, we went to church quite often, but not every Sunday, because it was a long walk. It was over a mile to walk to church.
You guys didn't have bicycles at the time?
Yeah, but we didn't ride a bicycle to church.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned you had a physical. Was there an intelligence test or an aptitude test that you took as well?
Yeah. And much to my amazement, I scored highly. I mean, when I went through in high school and then took that aptitude test, I couldn't believe it. I wonder if they scored it wrong because it was so high.
So you were eligible to do all kinds of different skills.
Yes.
And was there a discussion early on when you were put into the Air Force, the Air Corps at that time, of what you would be doing there?
No, when I was in basic training in Amarillo, Texas, I knew about the Air Corps, of course, but I had no idea there was any other position other than a pilot in flying. And at Amarillo Air Force Base, there was a mechanics school right there. I said, oh, God, don't put me in there. And because I knew that wouldn't work. But then I went to Lowry Field in Colorado after basic training. And that was armament school. And that's for the first time I realized that there was something else besides pilots. And I could have been I was going to be an armament gunner. You had to learn about bombs and 50 caliber machine guns and all that sort of thing. And the air base in Lowry Field in Colorado Springs was really, really great.
Well, I want to back you up to Amarillo, though.
Okay.
At basic training. Was this strictly a basic training for those in the Army Air Corps?
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Great. I had no problems at all. I was 4 years in ROTC in high school. So actually, everything they were going to try to teach me in Amarillo, I already knew. And so I had no problems whatsoever with basic. The only thing I didn't care about was KP or guard duty. Guard duty I didn't mind, but KP I didn't like too much. Because that was a long...
Tell me about what KP. What did you do on KP?
Well, clean pots and pans, mop the floors, clean the metal trays, everything you can think about in a kitchen police.
Normally, when I think about it, I'm always seeing this guy sitting over a pot peeling potatoes.
No, the funny thing is, I don't remember anything like that. All I remember is cleaning pots and pans and things of that nature. Did
you have a crusty old drill sergeant that you recall?
Yeah. I think he might have been German, but he had an accent. His name was Whitey. And blonde hair and everything like that. But anyway, the one thing about Whitey that I never could figure out, the marching song that we used was the rainbow song. I'm always chasing rainbows. Can you believe marching to I'm always... But that was his thing. And the other units had good marching songs, but we had I'm always chasing rainbows.
Yeah, I would have never guessed that for a marching song.
But I had no problems because I had so much training in ROTC, so I had no problems whatsoever there.
Was a lot of that just learning to becoming physically fit?
Well, of course, we went to PT. We had PT, and that was no problem with me because when we go on our runs, I was always ahead of everybody else. I was macho, showing off, stuff like that.
In other words, you inherited the fast trait from your family.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Amarillo, I mean, everything about the service was interesting for me. I had no problems at all.
And you'd already mentioned it, but where did you go after Amarillo?
Lowry Field in Colorado Springs. Or near Denver, I should say. Denver is where it was.
And you said armament training there.
Yeah.
Had somebody asked you what you wanted to do in the Air Force?
That's where they put me. They didn't ask me nothing. They just the only thing I knew, they could put me on a train, and I ended up in Denver, Colorado, which is great. It was a great area, and I loved it dearly. And then I went to armament school. You learn about turrets and machine guns and cannons and bombs, especially the bombs, how to fix those so they go off when they're supposed to go off.
Fuse them and arm them, those kinds of things. Was that okay with you, that kind of training?
Oh, no, I loved it. Now, our classes began about, I think it was at 10 o'clock at night and ended about 1 or 2 in the morning. And they had classes around the clock for some people, but for some reason or other, my classes were always late at night, never had daytime ones. And
so what are you doing for the rest of the day?
Sleep. No, sleep and study. You had to study. You had to study if you're going to do good, and they'll wash you out. They washed a lot of people out in training, and I wasn't about to be washed out. I wanted to fly, and so I wasn't about to be washed. In fact, I became 5th from the top in the educational aspect of it.
In other words, they're grading you. They're keeping track of this.
Oh gosh, yes. Oh yeah, they were tough too. Marching back, by the way, marching back to our mess hall, was about a mile-long walk going around the runway. It's a long walk. Well, at 1 o'clock in the morning, it was dark. So a lot of us would take off right across, and we'd run across and get the mess hall ahead of time.
One thing you haven't mentioned in this phase of your training is getting any airtime.
No airtime. No airtime. No airtime at all in Amarillo. I mean, in Lowry Field.
Were you able to stay in touch with your other 2 brothers who were already in the military at this time?
Oh, no, not really.
So hearing about them when you wrote to your folks?
Yes, yeah.
Were you one of those airmen who wrote often, or did the sergeants have to say,
No, I did not write very hard.
Raschke, you need to write to your parents?
Well, I had to write to my parents and my girlfriend, but not to my brothers or sister.
Oh, okay. We hadn't heard about the girlfriend yet.
Well, I told you I worked in a drugstore. I worked in one drugstore, the Drake Cart Pharmacy, a soda jerk. And one day, a young girl from Central High School came in, ordered a cherry Coke. That was her favorite drink. And she'd come in every day And one day I pushed one and said, I'll buy it. No, you aren't. She pushed it back. But anyway, that's how I met her. She was 14 and a half years old. And I started dating her. I won't go into all the story there because there is a story there. But I started dating her. She never dated another boy in her life. After I met her, I never dated another girl. And when we came out of the service, when I came home from overseas, I proposed. We got married the following year.
And her name?
Mildred Astleford Raschke now. We were married for 56 great years, happy years.
Jerry, you kind of hinted that there's more of a story to maybe the first date, or somewhere in there there's more of a story.
Well, just to this, her family moved away from the Drake court, and so I lost sight of her. And I guess we weren't on the telephone at that particular time because she was only 14. And I changed jobs to the Safeway store. I was a bag boy for the Safeway store, and I was in there one day, and here I saw Mildred and her family going, and this is a long ways away, and we got reacquainted, and like she was still very young, but so we had community sings in Omaha during the war. There were 1,000 or more people sitting on the banks with a screen with the words of the song and the music and stuff like that. And we would, her parents would allow us to get together. And we sat on a blanket, and the blanket got farther and farther and farther and farther away from the parents. But, and we started telephoning, and we'd be on a telephone for an hour or so at a time. And so it was a telephone romance primarily.
That first encounter in the pharmacy, it sounds like, what was it about Mildred?
Good question. Well, she was a beautiful girl. That has a lot to do with it. But it clicked for both of us. I didn't realize until really after her death, when some of her letters came to light, that it was at that time, and she already was interested in me, and I in her. And it was just one of those things where it was automatic.
Were you writing to her more often than your parent?
Oh, yeah. We wrote to each other a lot. Yeah.
Okay.
She more so than I.
What was your rank by the time you got done at Lowry?
Corporal.
So 2 stripes.
2 stripes.
Was that pretty standard?
Yeah, very standard.
And where to next?
Then we went to Florida, Fort Myers Air Base in Florida. I don't know whether it may have had another name, I can't remember. And that was for gunnery training. And there we flew.
Okay, you had already gotten armament training. Did somebody ask you, do you want to work with the bombs? Do you want to be in the aircraft?
No, they just assign you.
Okay. Gunnery training. That means you're going to be part of an air crew.
Yeah. I'm very happy about that. Very happy. I couldn't have been happier with my military training and what was going on.
Okay, Jerry. This was 1944 by the time you got to Florida?
Yeah.
All that news about B-17s and B-24s in Europe, the other aircraft in Europe, the casualty rates, the expectations of not surviving more than 25 missions on those big bombers. Yeah. Doesn't that give you some...
Never did, because I just love to fly. No, I hear what you're saying, and I may have thought of it, but I was so excited about flying that it took over everything else.
Then explain the kind of training you got once you got to Florida.
Well, the machine guns, of course, and 20 millimeter cannons, which I loved dearly, and shotguns. Now, yeah, they had shotguns with the various stations, and if you did not get an average of at least 20 out of 25 shots, you were washed out. Well, I was always up 24. I was never a good shot, and I never shot a shotgun before, but for some reason or other, I was able to handle it easily, and through no real skill, I guess. Anyway, maybe I was so interested in passing that I wanted to be more careful.
Well, the last weapon I would have thought to hear you mention was a shotgun. You're learning how to...
See, you have to lead. For example, when the fighters are coming in, you have to lead them. And that's the idea of shotguns.
Were you not going to the standard kind of military range with pop-up targets, or?
No, they weren't pop-up targets. They came from the side, either side.
So were the aircraft were towing targets?
Sometimes when we were flying, yes, but the shotgun was on the ground. We had stations on the ground. Yes, when we were flying, and they had tow targets, and each of the gunners had a different color shell, so they know who was hitting the target.
When you're on the ground with the shotgun, is that because 50 caliber would have been too expensive, or?
Well, yeah, it'd be too large too.
Okay. Okay. But obviously you're being trained to fire a 50 caliber machine gun.
Yes.
At that time, was there discussion of what kind of bomber you would be assigned to?
No, not whatsoever. I had no idea.
Did you have a preference?
No, I probably, if I did, and I don't know that I did, probably B-17. But since it had to be bombers, I'd probably B-17. But it wasn't until we got to Barksdale Field in Louisiana that we knew what aircraft we were going to be on.
Okay. Still got you in Fort Myers. Tell me about the training that was done once you were in an aircraft.
In the aircraft usually we're in the top turret, and the tow plane would come by, and you would have to shoot your 50 calibers. By the way, this is always done over the swamps of Louisiana too, or Florida, or over the bay.
Live ammunition.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I would think the guy who's flying the tow is a little nervous.
Don't worry. Of course, it was a long tow, but yes, they got hit a couple times.
Yeah. I wonder if they got combat pay for doing that.
I don't know. I don't know. I wondered the same thing long after. I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but...
Was part of the training then is being able to gauge the distance of the target and how much you have to lead?
Yeah, yeah. How fast it was going and how far to lead it. Yes, absolutely.
I would assume there's a lot of textbook training even of that.
No. Really? I mean, there's textbook training, yes, but when it came to shooting, that was instinct and training itself.
How well did you do in that aspect?
I was okay. At least I wasn't washed out, let's put it that way.
Okay. Now, you were near the top of the class when you were in Colorado.
Yeah.
I would assume they're still ranking you at that time?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. For example, in the shotgun, if you didn't hit enough targets, you were out. We did have some, we had some classrooms, but I don't remember them too much. So obviously, I must have passed.
But Jerry, you finally got in an aircraft and you got to fly. I'm sure that was where your heart was at.
That's where my heart was. But would you believe that the first time that I was in one of the bomber aircraft was in a Liberator, a B-24 Liberator. Now, I've never before or after been sick flying, but oh, did I get sick in that B-24 because it was all over just like that. But other than that, it was fine. We didn't fly too much. We didn't start flying until we were assigned the B-26, and we were in Barksdale Field in Louisiana.
Well, I thought you were saying that you got into air and were doing some of the gunnery training while you were still at Fort Myers. That's not the case?
Oh yeah, a little bit, but
okay.
A little bit, but not much.
Okay. Do you remember when you got to Barksdale then?
No, I don't remember exactly when I got to Barksdale, but I know it was a while before we got our crew. The they assigned your crews, and it was 2 or 3 weeks while we were in Marksdale before we got our crew. And so we had to pull KP or guard duty or something like that. And we learned, or I learned, and some of my buddies learned very fast to get out of it as much as we could. And what we did was, we were on the second floor of the barracks, and there's a little bit of a ledge there. And when we would hear the people, getting the people to go to KP and stuff like that from downstairs, we crawl out the window, make our bed, stay on the ledge, and when our bed was empty, the people thought, well, we were already on duty. When they were left, we go back and sleep some more. But more importantly, they had it's called Hangar 9 in Lowry Field. And they had a bunch of bowling alleys. And so we bowled all morning. I don't know whether we had to go back for, I can't remember if we went back for an afternoon checkout or not. Anyway, we bowled all day, one way or the other. And I was really angry with myself because I couldn't hit 300. I was going over 200 regularly, and I guess that was good, but
that's very good, Gerald.
but I was really angry because I couldn't hit 300. I came home for leave. I don't remember exactly what point in time, and I went bowling. And it was the guy that was running the bowling. I was the only one doing the bowling. He said I had a hook like that, and that's why I always got my hits. What do they call them?
Strikes.
Strikes. And so I always had that hook. Never had anything but that. This guy saw that. And he said, "You want me to straighten that out for you?" Oh gosh, yes. Please straighten it out. So he straightened it out. Never been able to bowl since.
Ruined it, huh?
Yep, and you sure did.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about getting assigned to that crew then.
Okay, that's really a good one. I mean, it's, first of all, I had my pilot, Roland Mitchell. By the way, in a B-26, if you didn't have a good pilot, you were dead. Now, I'm not kidding you about that at all. I'm being very serious about that. If you did not have a good pilot, you were dead. We killed as many in training as we killed in combat.
Well,
and
while we're at that, what were some of the nicknames of the B-26? The Marauder was the official name. What were the nicknames?
Well, the Widowmaker. The Widowmaker won a day in Tampa Bay because Tampa, when we went back for a reunion many years later, the headlines in Tampa were, "Won a day in Tampa Bay is back." But it was the Widowmaker, and there were a number of other good ones.
Well, can I share some of this?
Yeah,
See
please.
if that sounds familiar? The Flying Coffin.
Yeah, the Flying Coffin.
And here's my favorite, the Flying Prostitute.
Yeah, because okay, the reason for that is Flying Prostitute, there were no visible signs of support. The wings were so short that's why they call it the Flying Prostitute. Yeah, it's good. Thank you.
Tell me about the characteristics of B-26. Describe the B-26. I think we got a picture up here. 2 engines, obviously.
2 engines. If you look at it, it actually this is not as good a view as it should be, but it was a very sleek ship. It was more modern than what they had during those days. It was very fast. Now, a B-17 would take off and land about 70 or 90 miles an hour. A B-26, you had to be flying 150 miles an hour to take off and to land. And when you landed, you flew it into the ground at 150 miles an hour. That's why if you didn't have a good pilot, you were dead.
In other words, the runway, I would think, had to be a lot
Very
longer.
long runways. We had to have very long runways. And we often ran out of runway when we had had to go down early for one reason or another. But But the engines were 2,000 horsepower Pratt Whitney, which is a very powerful engine. And it was very sleek, very powerful, and very fast. In fact, one of the reasons we were not hit too often by fighters is that we were so fast that we were as fast as a lot of the fighter aircraft.
You know what the airspeed was?
Yeah, we were between 2 and 3, depending upon the target and stuff like that, between 200 and 300 miles an hour. 300 is an absolute maximum. One time coming off a target, we were 300 miles an hour, but around 200 is better.
How about the payload?
Okay, we could have 4 500-pound bombs, 2 1,000-pound bombs, or the frags, and that was about it.
Okay, so about a ton, it sounds like.
Yeah.
2,000 pounds, something in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And did you have the ability to climb as high as the 17s and the 24s?
Oh, no. Our maximum height was 12, because we didn't have any oxygen in the ship. No oxygen at all. Not even the pilots had them. And so if we got above 12,000 feet, your oxygen level was very low. And so we would start our bombing missions at 12,000 and go down and bomb around between 10 and 11,000 feet.
Okay. So you're a little bit bigger target for flak, I would think.
Yes, we were. Yes, we were, and yes, we were not. I mean, the B-17s or the 24s, the big ones, they were much slower. So they were easily tracked. And now, yes, they could put up a lot of firepower, a lot of flak to us, but if they were not at our altitude, we were okay, unless the shell itself hit us. But we were so fast, by the time we got there and by, they hadn't figured out our altitude. But if they were on our altitude, we were coming back with holes.
Tell me a little bit, describe a little bit the difference in the missions, the kind of missions that the 17s and 24s flew versus what the medium bombers were flying.
Okay, I can try. I can answer for the B-26s. Most of the heavies went after the cities, like Essen or Berlin or the bigger cities.
In other words, much longer range missions?
They were much longer range, about twice as long as ours. Ours primarily, we primarily we're in, what do I want to say? We're supporting the ground troops. And so we would bomb the bridges ahead or the marshalling yards to prevent the being refueled. I mean, the German troops being, what?
Resupplied?
Resupplied, thank you. And the front lines. We bombed a lot for the front lines. We sometimes right in front of our troops.
Which I would assume then that a little bit more precision than the big bombers.
Very, very much so. In fact, I think we'll get that next time, aren't we? Okay,
right.
let's hold off on that because I got a lot to say about that.
Okay, good. Let's compare the B-26 with the other medium bomber of the war, B-25.
B-25s. B-25 was the famous ship. It was safer. B-25, for some reason or other, and I don't know why, was a safer aircraft. And of course, it was on the Japanese bombing and all that. It was.
Yeah, wasn't it the USS Hornet the B-25s took off from?
And so the 26 could never have done that because we needed too long a runway. And because we were heavy, but B-25s are a good one. There are others in the British Air Force that were good, and I just know that they were good. But the B-25 and the B-26, and later the A-26, which was primarily in Korea, were the medium bombers. And we went pretty much after the same targets: marshalling yards, frontline troops, bridges, things of that nature. And we'll get into that next time.
I'm curious though. You're training now when you're still in the Shreveport area at what's the Barksdale?
Yeah.
Were you happy to be assigned to B-26?
I didn't know any different, but I was flying. That's all I cared. I was flying. That's all I cared.
So you didn't know the reputation of
No.
B-26?
We didn't know the reputation. We didn't know the reputation. We learned fast because a lot of my friends were killed in training. Some of my very good friends were killed in training. But very fortunately, my pilot, Roland Mitchell, had 1,500 hours in a B-26 before I ever flew with him. And he was one of the, what they call the flying sergeants. And I think he was teaching pilot training at Pearl Harbor, I think.
Oh.
I'm not sure, but I believe so. But oh, he was a great pilot. He did things with a B-26 that shouldn't have been done. Do you want me to go into something like that?
Sure.
First of all, he wanted to go into combat, but he was stuck in training. And this is told at a reunion several years later. I was in line, and he says, a guy come up to me and says, "You were with Roland Mitchell?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Would you like me to tell you a story?" I said, "Oh, please do," because we didn't know much about it. It was in training, wherever they were, and I think it was, I don't know where it was. He said, we were in training, and he wanted to get into combat, but they wouldn't let him because he was so good of a teacher. So what he did, he got into a B-26 and snap rolled it, which can't be done, but he did it.
What does that mean?
Just like that. Just turn just roll the ship over. He got back and he landed, and they let him go into combat because he twisted the centerpiece of the plane when he did the barrel, or did the snap roll. And then when we got into training, really good, it was really great. Well, it was in Louisiana. We'd go in Louisiana, the swamps and everything like that. And I'd be in the tail, doing nothing, and I'd hear over the headphone, "This one, no. This one, yeah, I think so. This one, no." I didn't know what it was until we came back. When they said yeah, we went under the bridge instead of over the bridge, and it was really, really exciting. And I remember this one. My engineer always stayed kneeled behind the pilot. And Mitch asked Hart, "You ever land airplane B-26 without engine?" He said, "It's impossible." He shut off both engines. We went down just like that. And made a perfect landing. And a Jeep came along and says, "Follow me," which is normal. Only the commanding general of the field was there and saw that. And Mitch was a first lieutenant then, at that time. He was made a second lieutenant until we left the field. And there was a couple other things that
You made captain when you left the field?
No.
Because you started as second lieutenant and then you promoted to first lieutenant.
We went back to first lieutenant. And you don't want to go into the overseas part yet?
No.
Okay, we'll do that later because that's sad, but I'll get into it then. What else? You got some questions?
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask you the crew. Explain the different positions in the crew.
You had the engineer gunner. He was the top turret. And Johnny Hart was a darn good. A lot of the engineers, gunners, were not so hot, but he was really well up. He was a good engineer gunner.
I know what a gunner does. What is an engineer?
Well, when the pilot needs some problems with the engines and stuff like that, he's there to take care of them.
So he's kind of the onboard mechanic.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the radio man is just that. He's usually in the waist position, and he does the radio work. And then there's a tail gunner, which is me. And if they have a problem with a turret or the gun or bombs, well, then I have to handle that. And we had a bombardier. Now, the bombardier was, of course, in the nose of the aircraft. And he had to, the co-pilot had to put his chair back for him to go in or to come back. And so it was difficult for him to go back and forth. And so he was pretty well stuck up in the nose during the entire flight. Didn't have to be, but usually was.
Sitting behind a machine gun, wasn't he?
Yeah, he had a machine gun. He had a single machine gun there. The radio man had a single machine gun on either side. The top turret had 2 machine guns, and I had 2 machine guns.
And everything was a 50 caliber machine gun?
Yes, everything was a 50 caliber.
That's a lot of firepower.
Yeah, well, that's not as much as what it was in the beginning. In the beginning, they thought the B-26 would be a low-level bomber. And it had 4 forward-looking guns on the fuselage. And when they would straf when they went by, well, that didn't last very long because we got shot up pretty bad.
Were those 20 millimeter cannons?
No,
maybe?
they're 50, all 50 caliber.
Okay. Yeah, that would be dangerous work.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you do some formation flying then when you got to Barksdale?
Yes, not much though. We were primarily navigation, some gunnery, but mostly navigation, and we would fly some formation because we had to fly, when we got overseas, we had to fly in formation, yes.
Were you already assigned to a squadron and a group at the time?
No, not until we got overseas.
Okay, so it sounds like most of the training was oriented around that crew level training.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
One position you didn't mention was a navigator.
The bombardier was a navigator. Bombardier navigator.
And it sounds like then that there was 3 officers and 3 enlisted?
Pilot, co-pilot, and bombardier navigator, and 3 gunners.
Okay. What was your rank at that time?
When I went over, I think I was a sergeant.
Okay. Now we're getting pretty close to the time your training is finally done. Are you eager to get into combat?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. In fact, we were afraid the war was going to be over before we could get there. Most of us were.
But there was still an awful lot of fighting that needed to be done.
We didn't realize that. Even when we went in, we were afraid, because we really knew we were going to win, but we thought it was going to be over a lot sooner than it was. But Hitler was pretty smart, and he had a lot of people, a lot of troops.
Okay. Before you shipped overseas, did you get another chance to go on leave?
No, I don't think so. I think I went home only once during my training, and my parents and my girlfriend, my dad got the passes because, and so they came to. It must have been Denver. No, it was Louisiana. Yeah, it was in Louisiana that they visited me.
Now, Mildred would be, what, 15 at this time?
She'd
16?
be about 15 or 16 by then.
But it was already pretty darn serious?
Oh, yeah.
What did she think about all of this? She's got as much at stake as anybody does in this deal.
Yeah, she was afraid for me, but she never let on. The conversation never came up to that. I'm sure she must have been very concerned. But by the same token, she was very young and a girl. And so maybe they didn't worry as much. I don't know. My parents were very worried. But I'm not too sure young girls were worried. Now, if you were married, yeah, they were worried. But I think young girls that were dating, I could be wrong.
I think you told me already that you proposed once you got back from the war. Did the subject of marriage ever come up?
Oh, it was always coming up. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Oh, sure. No, our letters were pretty darn good. So I'm not going to go into any detail there, but But they were pretty good.
I might ask you to actually bring one or two of those letters.
I don't have them.
Oh, you don't?
No, I don't. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
If they are, I don't know where they are. Let's put it that way.
Darn.
But they were. But see, remember, she was only 14 and 15, so it wasn't the love letter that you might expect, nor from me. In those days, we didn't have sex beforehand. Even when they came, my mom and dad came and visited me, wherever we were.
Barksdale.
I think it's Barksdale. And my mom and dad left us alone in the hotel room, but don't worry, nothing happened.
When did you ship overseas?
That's a good question. Well, it was in 44. Because, yeah, it started in 43. It was in 44. I think it was June or July of 1944.
Okay. What I want to kind of finish off with today, then, is your description of how you got to Europe.
Okay, that's a good one. There's a couple good things there. One, we were in Camp Patrick Henry waiting for a ship to come in. And usually you're there only maybe a week at the most, and we were there for a month. It so happened that our ship had been sunk. So they transported us to New York, and we flew across on what was called a C-54 at the time, and we landed in Morocco, Casablanca. And we were there for a day or two, and that was really very, very interesting. We walked around the area in Casablanca and went to the native quarter, and we did our thing.
Had you seen the movie Casablanca?
No. I don't think it was even out.
Yeah, I think it was released in 42, so it should have been out before
Okay,
that.
then if I did, I don't remember it. We flew then to outside of Algiers, and there was my first taste of war. Because Algiers is close by, the harbor was there, and we'd sit on the bank and watch the German bomber, what do they call him, the nighttime guy. He'd come and bomb Algiers harbor every night, so we watched it. Shrapnel would fly over us, stuff like that, but no problem there. And then we, I think we took a boat to, can't remember. I think we took a boat to Cagliari, Sardinia, which is on the west side of Italy. A lot of people don't know where Sardinia is. And the runway there was an old German runway. It was 6 runways together. And the fighters took off 6 abreast, and so did we. And that was kind of hairy. But
was it only once you got to Sardinia that you're now assigned to a squadron in
yes,
the group?
Yes, I was assigned to the 441st Bomb Squadron, 320th Bomb Wing, 42nd Group.
Okay. I guess what I was expecting to hear is that you flew a B-26 across the ocean, but that wouldn't have been long.
Some of them did. Some of them did. They had to. They fly to South America, and then there's a Ascension Island, and then to Africa, and then to some of them did, but I wasn't that lucky.
Okay, so you're getting a new aircraft once you get over there.
Well, we're getting another aircraft.
Another aircraft. Okay.
An aircraft.
Any other comments that you want to make about everything that we've mentioned all the way up to this
I could say one thing, that when I was in Algiers, Ben Blue and Sheridan gave a little show for us, and I had their autographs on my I got their autograph. I'll think of a short snorter, on my short snorter.
A short snorter.
A short snorter, every time you went to a different country, you put the dollar bill. It started out with the American dollar bill, and then added currency to every nation with it. And Ben Blue and Ann Sheridan signed it on the Algerian money.
Oh. Okay. I was just going to ask you a question here, and what the heck was it? We're about ready to wrap up for today, so that might be a good way to finish up. And next time, we're going to get into, I know what it was. Did you go over as a crew? The entire crew went over together? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So next time, we're going to hear about the combat that you flew. And
okay.
I'm really looking forward to that. You've got an excellent memory here, Jerry. So.
Well, that's debatable, but.
And I appreciate your willingness to talk about these experiences, because this next subject, there's some painful moments, I'm sure.
Yes, there are. I lost 1 in 3 of my buddies, including my pilot and co-pilot and the radio man I flew a lot of missions with. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that'll be for next Monday.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jerry. And thank you for joining us today.